911, what's your emergency?
The following content is graphic, emotional, includes dark humor that may not be suitable for all listeners. Discretion is advised. These stories are based on real-life EMS and healthcare experiences. Calls are real, providers are real, names and details have been changed to protect privacy. They may be disturbing to some and are definitely inappropriate for HR department. Any medical or mental health discussion is personal experience, not protocol. Use your damn brain. Follow your local guidelines, and when in doubt, call med control. If you're struggling, don't do it alone. Talk to someone, a coworker, a friend, a therapist, or hell, reach out to me. I'll answer. Need help right now? Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. All right, you're listening to Dispatched Dysfunctional, where burnout doesn't get blamed on the individual and the job finally gets called out for what it actually does to people. Today's guest is David Shar, a founder of Illuminate PMC, a speaker, a trainer, and industrial organizational psychologist who focuses on burnout, meaningful work, leadership behavior, and why organizations quietly lose their best people. David's work centers on hard truth. Burnout isn't caused by weak people, it's caused by broken systems that reward overextension and punish honesty. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So before we dig in, for listeners meeting you for the first time, who are you and what do you want people to take away from today's conversation?
Oh, I hate answering that question. Who am I? I never know. So I have an interesting past. My past started with ice cream, actually, which I absolutely love. And that's why I got into the ice cream business. But I got into a franchise, Cold Stone Creamery franchise, and I knew that I loved ice cream, so it seemed great. I also like awkward situations. I'm weird like that, and I don't know if you remember the old days of Cold Stone, but they used to sing for tips and do dances and stuff. So I was that guy, where you're shaking your head as you're leaving. But loved it. But it also set me on this path where, one day I looked around and noticed, and all the other restaurateurs and business owners around me were saying, hey man, you're not supposed to still have the same crew that you did like a year and a half ago still there with you now. Like, this is the restaurant business in Baltimore City. Like, why are people not turning over? Why aren't you having issues with like theft and all sorts of customer complaints and things like that? I'm like, I don't know. I guess because I'm so naive, I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to have those complaints, those issues. So I didn't. And so that led me on this journey where I started being asked to come help other organizations with their employee issues like burnout and turnover and things like that. And it dawned on me, like, I'm coming in, my employees are finding meaning in scooping ice cream, which is really what was happening.
Right.
And then people with objectively meaningful jobs like dreaded going to work on Monday. You're talking about people who are doing objectively meaningful work, like your listeners, right? All these helping professions and first responders and things like that. Those are the people that get so abused. They get into their profession because of the love for the job, because they want to help people, and they're the first ones to burn out. Very much, a huge piece of that, as we could get into, is because they're abused, they're taken advantage of because of that. And so that kind of led me on this trajectory more toward academia, because people kept asking me, how did you do that with your like inner city employees? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I've got to reverse engineer this and figure out how it's applicable to EMTs and firefighters and nurses and accountants and lawyers. So I'm a late bloomer. I ended up going back to school and launching my career as it is today.
That's awesome. That's great. Actually, I've started late in my life in this field as well, so it's all good.
Cool.
So what would you want everyone to take away from today's episode?
That if you're burning out, if you are falling out of love with your work, one, there's things that you could do about it. The other thing is that it's not your fault, but it is your problem. And hopefully we can get into, wherever you are in the hierarchy, how to not blame yourself, but to take responsibility for it.
I love that. That's a great way to put it. So, as you stated, you work with organizations that think burnout is solved with pizza, posters, resilient slogans. What was the moment you realized burnout isn't about being tired? It's about people slowly disconnecting from work, from meaning, and from themselves.
Yeah, the case that I love to talk about is the case of a busy bar on a Friday night. You walk into a busy bar on a Friday night, and the bartender's there. It's packed. You can't even squeeze in there to sort of order your drink, and they're grabbing the tips. They're making the drinks, taking the orders, grabbing people's tabs. And in that moment, if we believe what we're typically told about burnout, that burnout comes from overwork, right? It's workload equals burnout, then that bartender in that moment should be incredibly burned out.
Right.
But when you look at that bartender, and maybe you've had this experience, your listeners have had this experience of being that bartender, in that moment, you are not burned out. In that moment, more often than not, you are in a state of flow. And when you think about, when you're on your way to a call, you're on the ambulance or fire truck or whatever, right? And you're on your way to a call. You're not feeling burned out in that moment, man. That's the moment when you're feeling it. Like, this is what I do, right? And so, when do you get burned out? Let's go back to that bartender. If every time that bartender turns around to grab a glass, either there is no glass or the glass is dirty, now you've got somebody who starts looking like they're burning out. So it's not the work itself. It's not the work that we sign up to do. It's all of the other stuff. It's the bureaucracy. It's the barriers. It's the interpersonal conflict. It's the poor leadership. It's those things that get in the way of us doing the work that we signed up for. That's really what it comes down to.
Makes sense. And so, in plain language, how do you define burnout?
So I think burnout has sort of like three symptoms to it, which I guess the symptoms could sort of define it. There's emotional exhaustion,
Okay.
where you are just it's done. And I could give you a very clear story about emotional exhaustion, but there's emotional exhaustion. There's a sense of reduced personal accomplishment. So you feel like you are churning the wheels and not making progress. And that could be real or imagined, but it's all the same. Reality is in the eyes of the beholder, right? I mean,
Right.
like, it doesn't matter what the actual reality is. I tell leaders this all the time, because it's really hard to break through their egos. So instead of telling them that they're wrong, that the complaints about their employees are right and they're wrong, what I say is, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, if they're right about this or not. Their perception is reality. So if you have that sort of feeling like you're just churning wheels and not accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish, then that's the second piece. And the third piece is depersonalization, or increased cynicism. But really, in the fields where your listeners are, it's more depersonalization, where you're sort of, it's a self-protective kind of thing, where you go out on calls, and the first months of going out on those calls, you see the human in front of you. You're hovering on top of this person having a heart attack, and you're doing everything to save that person, and you see their humanity. It couldn't be more real. But over time, the depersonalization becomes this personal, like a personal barrier that you put up to protect yourself, where you stop seeing it as Mr. So and so, and you start seeing it at, like, who could be a father and a husband and a community member, and you just start seeing it as a heart attack. And so you start treating the symptom, but not the person. But in the beginning, when you're not burned out, you're treating both, and they're not mutually exclusive. But I can tell you, so that emotional exhaustion with that depersonalization, um, my I've got 5 kids, so my youngest, a couple days after he was born, we noticed sort of this bulge on his head. So we took him to the hospital, and I remember like time started to just like have no meaning, and the whole world sort of seemed to pause, as they told us that they had to take him to another hospital that specializes in, head trauma with young kids, like infants.
Right.
And they put him in this stretcher that would have looked comical if it wasn't like horrible that it even existed. This little baby stretcher you're probably familiar with, right? And they rushed him over to this next hospital, and that's where I learned what you do when you can't find a vein in a traditional way on an infant. And that was horrifying, and I could still hear the sounds and see it. And
Yeah,
to this day, and he's now 6 years old.
those IOs are
Um,
very. You'll hear that noise till the day you die.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. And then we finally got him settled and up to his room, and he's got all these wires, and he's in his crib, but we can't hold him, we can't access him, and he's there crying. And my wife and I, who she's a professional teacher, I'm a professor and a lecturer, a speaker. We never stopped talking, but we had nothing to say.
Yeah.
We were just there in our trauma. And I remember these nurses in this world renowned hospital in downtown Baltimore that I won't say the name of, but if you know, you know, right? World renowned, one of the best hospitals in the entire country, if not world. Um, the nurses there, who are the best of the best, were coming in and they were checking his vitals and then sort of looking over at us and say, "You need anything?" And then leaving. And I remember feeling like a shattered human being, feeling as I didn't know if my son was going to live, and if God forbid something would happen there, I knew, like what the repercussions would be on my wife and our family and everything, and it was absolutely, absolutely awful. And in that moment, I felt like these nurses were incapable of seeing us,
Right.
and it was incredible to see in the moment and then think about afterwards. But that's burnout, that's depersonalization, that's coming to the point where it's just too painful to see that, to deal with that human every time, and you get lost in the paperwork. And so we weren't the Shar family, you know that wasn't Henry in the crib, that was the head trauma in room 2 or whatever
Right.
it was.
And honestly, I'm guilty of this. Is it? As you said, it's depersonalization, but it's all desensitization for us as well. As if we did intake every patient's information and construe it in our own heads and empathize with it, and it would honestly cause burnout a lot faster. Is the issue with our jobs on that, and that's
Oh yeah, it could
but
it could tear you apart.
yeah,
Yeah.
it that is our way of protecting ourselves from burnout, is by causing us to burn out. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know what's so interesting? There's been studies that show the difference between men and women on average when they go through burnout. They looked at teachers and they saw that as they were burning out, um, women were really suffering the emotional exhaustion piece. Like they were really becoming emotionally exhausted, overwhelmed by their daily work and by their students, whereas the men were so much better at just like shutting down and just cutting off the student as a person, and just, and so different people deal with it at different
Yeah,
in different spots, but all of it's unhealthy.
right. Yeah, very true. Very true. So, what do most leaders misunderstand about the root cause of burnout?
Yeah, I think that the root cause of burnout that most people misunderstand, I think that there's this understanding that it's a personal failure, or that it's personal at all. when we look at burnout, it's very, very contagious.
Yeah. Yes.
When you walk into an organization, it's either a high burnout organization or a low burnout organization. And if that's such a personal, on a personal level, you wouldn't see that, right? So I'm sure that you could go to firehouses and find tons of burnout, and other firehouses that do the same work with very low burnout. So it's not the individual. Earlier in my career, I used to be invited a lot to work with organizations. And the thing they would want me to do early in my career, before I started saying no to this, is to talk to their employees. That basically my intervention should be focused on the employees. They wanted me to teach their employees how to take a punch and get back up. And it dawned on me, like, I always felt like, is this really the right solution? It dawned on me, maybe instead of teaching your employees how to take a punch and get back up, maybe I should talk to your leaders and teach them how to stop punching them. You know, like maybe this is a leadership issue where leaders can get involved and remove barriers, but too often leaders add barriers to that like we said, the original mission, the original draw, they add to that instead of taking it away. Leaders should be the blockers. They should be the things that are, that those positions where they are trying to get everything out of the way, and just allow the mission to seep through. But instead, so often they're the ones that are adding so much of this stuff. So that's where my work shifted over time, where I work with the entire organization, but so much of it is at that leadership level.
Makes sense. And it like you said, that the root cause of the issues need to be addressed, and not just the single person.
Yeah.
Singling out a person does, in my opinion, cause more burnout. And I hate to say it, but the places I've been that have had burnout, it's almost like a plague. Once one person gets burned out, it passes to another. It constantly flows and just done.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you dive into the organizational psychology research, you find almost everything that happens at work is contagious.
True.
Like burnout is contagious, engagement is contagious, incivility is contagious. Everything's contagious, for better or for worse. People model each other, and things spread real quick.
That's very interesting to hear. I've never thought about that when it actually makes sense.
Yeah.
So why do high performers burn out before everyone else does?
So there's this researcher. Her name was Ayala Pines, and what she said was that in order to burn out, you have to be on fire first.
Okay.
And I kind of love that, because you don't see necessarily stockbrokers, burning out. If they got in to make money, then they're making money, and yeah, they could be stressed out, they can need a vacation, but it's not the same. It's not the same thing. When you care a lot and then you lose that, that's where you really see burnout. And I would argue that it goes deeper than just the burnout, because so my research, my independent research, has been on passion loss.
Okay.
Right. So passion decline. So what is it to be passionate about your work and then to lose that passion for your work? So I think that oftentimes what we label as burnout is a little bit mislabeled. It's a piece of passion decline, but the big issue and what's hitting people so hard is passion decline. So passion for work or for anything is when you find you love something, you find it meaningful, you engage in it like with a lot of time and effort, and really importantly, when it becomes part of your identity. And I know this crowd, your listeners, this really becomes part of your identity. We're talking about who you are, right? I mean, like, when you're a first responder, that is your identity. That's who you are. And so people who are just in it for a paycheck, it's not that. It doesn't become part of their identity in the same way. So when you identify with the thing and you're passionate about it, and then you lose that, that so often becomes, when I was researching this, my respondents said the way they described this was like going through an awful divorce. Not even just a breakup, but an awful divorce where it's part of your identity and then starts getting ripped apart as you fall out of love with it.
Right.
And it's not just wow, I'm really exhausted from this work. It's like, who am I? If it's not a first responder, if this isn't what gets my heart going, then who am I?
Right. Yeah, we call it emotional fatigue is what we call it. So,
Yeah.
you know, let's see. What was a question I had a minute ago? That was so. Well, how do you feel about the "I'm fine" as a danger signal?
The saying I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that again, when we make burnout about the individual, then there's shame involved in it. Like you're burning out of this, maybe you don't care enough. Maybe you don't. So then there becomes this macho sort of thing where it's like, no, I'm good, I'm good. And that's about as productive as saying I'm fine when you're actually suffering from depression, which is incredibly linked to
Right.
burnout, right? And so if you don't feel safe, if there isn't the psychological safety to stand up and say, I need help, then that's just going to continue the problem. When people understand that there are other people's that are suffering from burnout, you think that might make it worse. In some studies, it actually makes it better. Like connecting and talking about things. But this is why, because sort of there is this sort of tendency to say, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine." Every boss that I've ever talked to tells me that they have an open door policy, right?
Yeah.
They always have an open door policy, and so I've seen a ton of open door policies. Sometimes it's an open door policy, but the door is very literally closed, and other times they'll literally open it. But my thing is, when it comes to open door policies, what I say to leaders is, unless that door is open wide enough to get your ass out of your office so that you can walk out your door and meet people where they are, it's not an open door policy, because you can't trust people to come to you when there's an issue. You have to go to them. You have to know your people. You have to understand when they're suffering and hear the whispers before the screams. Understand before they're suffering so that you can do something about it.
I got you. Yeah, it makes sense, and that whole, pardon my French, the whole bullshit of the open door policy is one thing that pisses me off at a lot of places because of, oh, it's open door, but when you try to talk to them, it's like, oh no, I'm busy.
Right.
It's not open
Right.
door. That's, you come in when I want you to come in.
Yeah. Yeah. And even take people at their word, because I would say a huge percentage of people are exactly that. They say open door policy and it means nothing.
Right.
But let's say you get that great manager who's like, I know what it was to be coming up in this, and I am really going to have an open door policy. And when people come into their office, they really do, listen and respond and whatever. That also isn't enough.
Right.
You can't wait for people to come to you, because, like
So,
you
yeah.
said, what happens with people that are just like, I'm fine, I'm fine. No, you need to know your people. You need to get out there. Even with the best of intentions, it's not gonna be as successful as you leaving your office, because not everybody is going to feel comfortable enough approaching you.
So that brings up actually my next question right there. So earlier you said that the workers have to feel safe to be able to go to the management. So how can workers start to feel safe, or how can leadership start making it feel safe for them to come to them when they need help?
Yeah. So first of all, be human. I think that so often there's this imposter syndrome where you get the nicer uniform, you get the nicer job title, you get that office, and now you're under the microscope of not just leadership, but also your employees. And so we put on the nicer suit, and really it's not just a suit that they're putting on or a uniform that they're putting on, it's a suit of armor that they're putting on, because they have such imposter syndrome. Like, what if they realize that I don't have all the answers? Okay, great. I tell people all the time, I tell leaders, it's not a question. Your followers don't have this question of whether you're fallible or not. They know that you're fallible.
Right.
The thing they don't know and they need to know is whether you think you're fallible or not. Right? They need to know that you're human. They need to know that you don't have all the answers. They need to know that you make mistakes. And so the openness is extremely important. Being human. I think what oftentimes happens is as we climb that ladder, we become less and less human, less and less relatable. And that is the absolute opposite of what should be happening. If you can be human, people can be human to you. If you approach your people and seek out feedback, then they will be open to receiving feedback from you. If you show compassion for your people, they'll show compassion for you. Everything goes both ways. It's reciprocated. So the colder you get as you climb up that ladder, you're leaving everybody behind, and they don't feel like they have any representation or a voice at all.
I love that. That's a very, very well phrased, and it makes 100% of sense, even from my standpoint of starting as an EMT to a medic. And I've noticed some medics, once they get that title, they start looking down upon, as they call them, peons or subordinates. And to me, that's not being part of a team. That and not playing proper teamwork does cause burnout a lot faster, and it does, make it a lot horrendous to go to work in the end. Your coworkers don't want to come to work with you. They don't want to talk to you. They don't want to give you feedback, even if you ask them.
Right. And isn't it interesting? Because again, it's about contagion. Because, I'm thinking even to my son is a freshman in college and he rushed a fraternity. And the rest of us at home, we were just embarrassed for him with all the things he had to go through with the non-hazing. Hazing's illegal, but
Right.
like call it what it is, and just awful stuff. And I said to him, and I'm saying to him often, I'm like, next semester, you're in the position where you're now the full-pledged brother. Don't be the asshole. Don't do that to other people. But there is this idea, I hear this from my lawyer clients all the time, right? Behind closed doors. Well, I had to go through all of this and it wasn't easy for me and nobody gave me a hand up. So therefore, I'm not going to give that to my new lawyers and paralegals. It's like, I had to go through it. I had to go through the hazing, so I'm going to haze you too. And by the way, this is probably not a popular opinion, but I'm not saying that hazing in some form is always bad, to the extent that it builds ritual and community and stuff like that, as long as it's not done to hurt an individual, but to, make them work a little bit to gain that respect and stuff. Okay, not necessarily always bad. I'm not gonna put like a hard stop on that. Like psychologically, it does form tighter bonds. However, like it's gotta always be, like they say, you shouldn't make fun of people. Like they should all be part of the joke, right? Like, and so I think that's okay in certain scenarios and in certain ways. But when you find that you get abused by, the paramedics when you're the new EMT, and then you become the paramedic and you remember how awful that is, but your reaction isn't the cycle's going to break with me. The reaction is, well, I had to go through it, so now it's my time to pay it forward.
Yep.
If you really sit with that for a little bit, it doesn't make sense. You didn't like going through that. And so
Why do that?
don't now you be the asshole.
Right. And that's actually a very good point. Is I actually did break the cycle with a bunch of the basics I worked with. Is once I got my medic, I remembered what it was like going back through school, go back through ride outs, going through all of it again and working with some of the assholes that I worked with and trying to just ask for help because I'm still going through school at the time. And I don't know, well, I had to fucking learn it. Now you got to learn it. Okay. That's not, no, we're supposed to be mentors. We're not supposed to be assholes. I can understand, hey, go look in the book at this part, or hey, go look this up. I can understand kind of steering people in the right way, but don't be an asshole.
Right. And there is so much more power in that mentorship framework where people will love you forever, where they will literally have your back, where in your line of work, that could be life or death
Right.
in certain situations for you or your patients, right? And so, like actually being the good guy and being the mentor, it goes a really long way. My wife said that once, maybe more than once, I've said the line, hurt people.
Right.
And my 8-year-old apparently heard me say that and now says it all the time. Every every time one of her older siblings is an asshole toward her, she'll just mumble,
Hurt people.
hurt people, hurt people.
That's awesome. I love that. That's awesome. So you study the relationship between meaningful work and burnout, and in EMS and fire health and healthcare safety work, meaning is everything. So how can meaningful work increase burnout?
Yeah, so I think we've talked about a couple different
little
ways,
bit,
but
yeah.
one of the things is there was this really great article, research article where they interviewed zookeepers, and it was called "The Dark Side of Meaningful Work." And there's a whole line of research around the dark side of meaningful work now. But this study really stuck with me because what happens is that these zookeepers would be given days off, but they wouldn't take them. They were never offered raises. They were never given assistance, and all of that just had to be okay because otherwise, think of the animals, right?
Right.
I mean, so you found that people will take advantage of you because you're doing the meaningful work. In other words, if you're there and it's transactional, so a transactional type of job, I'm here for the paycheck, and you won't need me to be your worker bee, and that's the transaction. Then yeah, so if you don't hold up to your end of the bargain, then I'm not going to hold up to mine. I'm not going to work as hard, right? But when there's life at stake, right? When you are an EMT, a firefighter, a nurse, a teacher, you know, there's lives at stake, right? Then it's easier for people to take that for granted and take advantage of you, because you're not just going to say, well then F it, I'm not going to save this life. Right. You're not going to say that. And so unfortunately, I think it gets built into the culture. You know, in my study on passion decline, I had somebody who was in social work, very similar type of helping profession, and she was in all these different social work jobs throughout her career, and she talks about the day that you know, her and her colleagues, they all believed in the mission, bled the mission, like they were there to help people. But she remembers, finally, she describes it as being able to peek behind the curtain, like in The Wizard of Oz, and realize that everyone's full of shit is exactly what she said, right? She sees behind the mission, behind the curtain, and sees, oh, to leadership, this is a job. This is about the money and about moving up in the ranks and about their ego and about all these other things. And it's like they just keep us down here being all mission driven. So if you're in leadership, you cannot become disconnected from that mission. I remember working with a nonprofit where they were serving people experiencing homelessness. And I remember going up to their top level, and where they had the C-suite and you had the CEO and the directors and all that stuff, and they're all up there and they are oozing the mission. They're telling me how great this is and how important this is, and really, like, I felt it. Then I went down to the ground floor where people were working hand in hand with the people experiencing homelessness, with all of the mental illness, drug addiction, tons of challenges, and they're working with the challenge every day. And that can get old real fast, right? So these other people are talking about the mission, but they're not touching the mission at the same level. The people that are on the ground floor, you have to deal with the patient who's refusing your help, right? Or where you're in the line of fire trying to help somebody. And that is the hard work. So as you get up into these levels and the mission becomes this big idea kind of thing, but you get separated from the daily work and the daily stresses and barriers to the mission. I think it's easy to start forgetting that. So like I said before, getting out of your office, going downstairs, getting on the ambulance. I think that's extremely, extremely important to keep your finger on the pulse and to remind yourself of what it's all about. And by the way, the signal that sends to everybody else, that you're not above this work, that this is the work, this is the point, is exactly the point. It's ridiculous to me that we're in this society where we move up the ranks by moving further and further away from the actual work that carries out the mission of what we do. It's insane. Like really, the people at the top are should be the people who are doing the work, but it's the people that are putting together the vision and stuff like that. And okay, I'm not going to buck it entirely because I want to be part of that system too and keep getting tired at the top, right? But in reality, it's like, don't we have this bass backwards? I mean, like really, the stars are the people who are doing this every day, and that's the core work. Leaders should be taking that spotlight and putting it on those stars. They shouldn't be trying to perform for the spotlight themselves. That's ridiculous.
I like how an old supervisor I said put it one day is, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget that you start at the bottom.
Right.
Always stay humble, stay loyal to your followers, because that will, like you said earlier, it will create a following, it will create a presence, it will create more morale, it will help prevent more burnout, and it does create the open doors that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And and then actually, here's another question I had for you: is why do people feel guilty for setting boundaries in mission-driven jobs?
Yeah, they do, because it's meaningful work and somebody gets hurt if I can't come in. I mean, if you're telling me if I call in sick, in my job in retail, it's like, boo hoo. If I'm calling in, although you could argue that hurts the customer to a certain extent, your coworkers to a large extent, etc. But if I call in sick and there isn't somebody to get on that ambulance, that's not good for anybody, right? So I think that's why it becomes hard. It's this idea that we're there for meaningful work and we can't be there for the paycheck, because that would make it seem like we're not there for the meaningful work. I think it's okay to demand both.
Right.
Like you should be paid for your hard work, and also that doesn't take away from the core mission. But yeah, I think that's what makes it really hard to put up these boundaries. It's like, how committed are you? But in reality, I think putting up the boundaries, and here's where from the beginning I said that I hope people would be able to take responsibility wherever they are, recognizing that it's not necessarily their fault, but taking responsibility. I think that at every level, we have the responsibility to set up boundaries. I think that if you are an individual, you need to put boundaries in place early on, because if you don't, then you're setting a precedent and you're not going to be able to add them later. If you're in leadership, you need to enforce boundaries. If you have somebody, I've seen this with my own research, it's the same people who say, yes, I will volunteer for everything. I will do anything you need. I will be there every time. I will work every weekend. I'll like rush back from vacation because you're a man short or a woman short. It's those people who are your absolute gems. They're your high performers. They are like the best thing for your company, for your station. They are the best thing for society. They are the best. And so you can have that and have that going strong for a short amount of time by taking advantage of that and taking them for granted. Or you can say, no, I insist you stay on that vacation. I insist you take this Saturday off. And that will preserve that person and their loyalty and their passion for so much longer. And so it's never easy to do. And so we see all the time in organizations, people cut corners because it's the thing that I need today needs to take precedence. But you've got to stop looking at the short gain and look at the long game and understand, okay, I need to insist that this person has boundaries and I need to help them enforce these in order for me to have them at their best for a long time instead of a shorter time.
Yeah. Okay. And you actually said this earlier. Your training focuses on real behavior change, not on theories.
Yeah.
So, what do leaders do that unintentionally accelerate the burnout? I know, just like you said, calling in people that volunteer normally, but what's a couple of other things that they could do that they unintentionally do? I should say.
Yeah, it's all of the things that are not about the mission itself. They need to be running a block on all of those things. They need to be putting up barriers. When there's interpersonal conflict, they've got to shut it down. If it's negative conflict, some conflict is good within organizations. I don't want to be
True.
mistake there, but if it's unproductive, if it's incivility and things, they have to shut that down. They have to. One of the things that managers often do is they get it twisted, the difference between being nice and being kind. We don't need nice managers, we need kind managers. um, I've come across a good amount of managers who think that it's all about being nice, and so when they need to give feedback and it's tough, then they have to be mean, right? And that's not true. Feedback is kind. Giving feedback is kind. But on the other side, some of them just they need to be liked, and so they'll be nice to everybody. But you know what happens when you're nice and you just keep coddling somebody who is toxic within your organization? Very quickly, everybody else who's being impacted is going to move along, or they're going to become uncivil themselves. Like we said, everything in at work is contagious. One of the most contagious things is incivility. The leading indicator that somebody is going to become uncivil toward their coworkers or their patients or their boss or whatever, the number one indicator is if they were either a victim of incivility or if they even witnessed incivility, even if they were a bystander before. So if you see people being rude to each other at work, you're more likely to be rude, even if it's not to either of those people that were involved in that thing that you saw. Pretty crazy how contagious it is. So managers have to not worry about their own ego and their own need to be liked, and they need to step up and do what's right. They need to be principled. So I think that that's one of the missteps. Being an asshole doesn't work. Being overly nice doesn't work. Being kind and fair and investing in people and their growth and believing in them and believing in them enough to give them positive feedback and give them the real feedback that they need, even when it's uncomfortable. That's really, really important. People don't thrive and they don't grow in environments where they don't get feedback. And so they might feel uncomfortable. They might need to go and storm off after you gave them some good feedback, some critical feedback. That's okay, as long as they know that you support them. If you build that culture, it's okay. So that's one of the things. Giving feedback is incredibly important, and being and in a kind way where people understand you're there to support them and grow them. Meaning you're not only there to tell them when they mess up, but you're also there to tell them when they're doing something amazing. So that's just one example of what they can do. But opening communication, getting your ass out of your office, that's another thing. And just reducing the barriers and making sure that people aren't overloaded by the things that get in the way of them doing the work that you hired them to do. Um, that's how you protect people.
Gotcha. And actually, that's a good trail to lead me into this one. So, how do you build a culture where saying "I'm not okay" isn't career suicide?
Yeah, because that's exactly how you build a culture, and it's got to start somewhere, right? And a lot of times it starts with modeling. It starts with modeling, and again, that leader being able to be human.
Right.
It starts with starting the conversation with people, with showing support. And by the way, these fears live inside of us. But really, when somebody does come out and says, "Hey, I'm not doing so great right now," it's not like people won't rally around them. They do, And if you're in a place where they don't, get the fuck out, like leave,
Exactly.
because
Exactly.
you need a new job, okay? Like I help people with overcoming burnout and building better organizations. But that also comes with the advice that sometimes an organization is not worth the effort of trying to fix, and it's time to go find another one. But that's after you give it a shot.
Right.
That's after you give it a shot. But being the change you want to be is incredibly important. Let it start with you. Be the brave one. Because as soon as you're able to step out on a limb and say, "Hey, I'm not okay," or "I'm feeling burnout," or whatever, then it gives people the opportunity to support you in that moment. And then they're going to feel more comfortable in the future, being a little bit more open as well. And then things start revving up from there. And so, therefore, we have this misconception also where leadership is, we think, I ask my graduate students about what is a leader, and oftentimes they'll start listing, well, when you have employees and no, you don't need a job title to be a leader. I think we've all had at least one person with the title, supervisor, manager, chief, CEO, whatever.
Right.
We've all had a leader who was a leader in title only, right? Actually carried no influence whatsoever. We also have all worked with somebody, probably, and maybe you are that person, whoever's listening to this, but where they had no title to back it up, but they had leadership, they had power and influence within the organization because people just wanted to follow them. I worked with this organization. They had this really popular, amazing summer camp, and the leaders, the official leaders, right, the people that ran the camp, were running into issues with a couple of their employees, their veteran employees. And so they knew exactly what they had to do. There were these two employees that were so outspoken, and everybody seemed to follow them. So they said, "You know what? You two are fired." And the next day, nobody showed up at camp. None of the counselors. They had to shut the camp down in the middle of the summer. Yeah. So let me ask you, who was the leader in this situation, right?
Right.
So if that's true, if you can have that level of power and influence without a job title, camp counselor is not a job title compared to, camp director, then you can evoke change. The change can start with you. Referent power is the most powerful form of power, and that's the power of walking the walk, where people just want to emulate you. They look up to you. You mentor them. They follow you. They follow in your footsteps, and they'll follow you to the ends of the earth. Having the power to fire someone, having the power to give someone a raise, having the power because the org chart says you have the title, all of that stuff is fleeting.
It don't mean shit.
My dog, I have a ton of power over my 225-pound English Mastiff.
Right.
When I'm holding a thing of string cheese, right? He will do anything for me. But the second that string cheese isn't in my hands, forget about it. I have no power, right? And so leaders who think that they're holding power because when they're in the room and they have the ability to punish you or reward you, if they think that that's any sort of, it's any sort of influence, long-lasting influence, they're mistaken.
Right.
You'll do the right thing or the thing they want you to do when they're in your presence, when you're in their presence, but not when you're not. But that referent power, it's like, thinking, what would so-and-so do in this moment? That's power.
Right.
So therefore everything starts with you. Be that person. Walk the walk. Don't just be the sheep that follows everybody else. If you're walking into a toxic culture, you walk into a room you have two options. You can feel out the room and say, "Ooh, it's really toxic in here." You could be the thermostat or the thermometer, right? The thermometer measures the toxicity and says, "Oh, it is toxic," and then just joins in the toxic fun or slowly backs out of the room. The thermostat sets the temperature in the room. It says, "Oh, it's a little toxic in here. Let me adjust and reduce the toxicity in the room." That's the power that you may be surprised to find that you have. But in order for that to happen, and it's kind of going back to where we started, you can't point your fingers at other people, even if you're right, even if it is their fault, even if leadership has built something that's toxic. It doesn't mean that it's out of your sphere of influence, out of your power. Once you start feeling that, then yeah, you don't just have burnout to worry about. You have deep-seated depression to worry about, because when you have an external locus of control, when you stop believing that you have any power over your own life and your own surroundings and your own climate at work, then that powerless feeling is not good for your psyche. It is going to be extremely damaging. So people who point to other people, I find this all the time when I'm doing trainings. I'll do a training. I remember doing this training for this regional bank, and I did a training for the C-suite, middle management, and frontline management. And in every one of those separate 3 trainings, each group pointed at all the other ones. And I have a rule in any of my trainings: you do not get to point your finger outside of the room, because everything you say could be true, but so what? The question is, what can we do about it? And the only way that we can do something about it is if we point to our ability to act inside the room.
Very okay. Yeah, I love that. And that makes sense. You have to be the one to change it. You can't be complacent and just keep letting it happen. You have to either shut the fuck up or do something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's a good question: is what does a healthy team do differently after a brutal week than a toxic team?
Yeah, I think first of all they communicate, and they communicate again with that internal locus of control. They communicate and talk about things in a way where they can be vulnerable and can talk about their role and sort of talk through tools to overcome these things, where they can support each other. When necessary, they bring in outside help. And I think that support is incredibly important. I think holding people accountable in a supportive way is important. But when everybody's fingers, like we just said, if everybody's fingers start pointing at each other, or it's just nobody talks about it, everybody goes home and deals with it in their own way. And that way is rarely healthy. We all have our thing, right? I mean, my big thing is that when I say that people clock into work and clock out of life, and then vice versa, right? And it's like we all kind of fall into this thing when we have this unhealthy relationship with work, where we go to work, we just do our thing, we come home, we clock out, we go home, and we drug ourselves.
Yeah.
Some of us it's illicit drugs, some of us it's alcohol, some of us it's pot, some of us it's just sitting in front of the television and not moving for 5 hours. Whatever it is, we all have our thing, right? And then we go to sleep and wake up the next day and do it all again. And it makes you question, what the hell am I doing here, right?
Yeah.
You should be one version of you, right? And so when I look at passion for work, people who are passionate for work, passion can be unhealthy or healthy. It's unhealthy when it's disconnected, when it's like I'm one person at home and I'm one person at work. When it's all connected, it's what we call harmonious passion, because I'm passionate for my work, because I get to be the best version of me. So I go home and I'm that person, and I'm at work and I'm that person, whatever it is. Maybe I'm a hero, right? And so And so at home, I view myself as a hero. At work, I view myself as a hero. Maybe I don't call myself that because that sounds conceited, but right, like I'm a hero, I'm a helper, I'm a healer, I'm whatever it is that you connect with. I'm a first responder. To be that at home and at work, like have that harmonious thing is incredibly important. But in order for that to happen, you have to be able to process things, both at home and at work. So I think that teams process things together, just like your team at home.
Right.
If you're married and you're not processing things out with your spouse, then it gets uncomfortable over time.
And fast.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you could mandate one organizational change tomorrow, what would it be?
There's so many. So I think that one organizational change that I would mandate is and I don't know, it would have to be different within different organizations, but I think that there needs to be boundaries set in place. There are certain organizations throughout Europe where the business cell phone turns off
Yep.
when they leave, and they can't access it. Um, Barriers like that. I think that every organization should have to build in some sort of barrier where they hold people accountable to be unaccountable when they're not at work.
To let them have a
To
better
be able
work-life
to,
balance in the end.
exactly.
And so, what do you say to the reliable one who carries everything for everybody?
I think that you're doing yourself and your colleagues a disservice at that time. Again, step into that role of leader. Be a mentor, pull people along with you, show them, teach them how to do this too. Sometimes the person who carries everything with them, that is a grab for power in and of itself, by the way. It's not always altruistic. Sometimes I find that I have job security if I'm the only one who can do it, if I'm the only one that can handle it. And so I will maybe simultaneously complain about, oh, it all falls on me. But as soon as somebody tries to take something off my plate, I say, no, it's mine, right? like that could be very toxic in its own right. So you have to ask yourself, why am I carrying all this myself? You have to learn to trust other people, mentor other people, and give up some of that stuff.
I appreciate your time, and this was a great episode. I've actually learned quite a bit from you today.
Yeah,
um,
thanks so much.
so that was David Shar. Appreciate you bringing your science, your honesty, your zero bullshit to a topic people love and love to oversimplify. So before we close, where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, so they can find me, my website, davidshar.com. That's DAVIDSHAR.com. There's also illuminatepmc.com. And then LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn, I'm always there. So like connect with me, message me there, and I'd love to continue the conversation. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only David Shar. There may be one other, but I'm the one who
The one and only.
is active. Yeah.
So speaking directly to the listeners who keep saying, "I'll rest after this shift," what would you want to say to them?
Shift is over. Go rest. Find find an opportunity to rest. I was working with this guy. He's a high powered chef, huge, like one of the best chefs in the entire world. Um, Kitchen all on his shoulders, really high stakes. He has two hobbies. He drums in a band, and he goes out on a lake on his own and fishes for hours. And those two things keep him sane. And they don't only make him better outside of work, they make him better at work because you need that. You're going to be a better paramedic, a better EMT, a better firefighter, a better whatever you do if you're taking care of yourself outside of work. So you need social time.
Yep.
That's his drumming, right? These social times where you get to just be with loved ones outside of work and build that support system outside of work. And you need alone time where you don't need to be anything for anybody. I think that both of those things are incredibly important. So it's time to schedule those on your calendar.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. Is if you live, breathe, eat, sleep, work, you're not going to enjoy your job anymore. You're going to be burned out faster. You're gonna, you know, want to not go to work. You need to, like you just said, have solo time, have social time. It may be strenuous and painful to start at first by yourself. To go out, go meet people, go do things. But we are social creatures. We need to, habitually go out and meet with people. We need to habitually sit there and have time for ourselves. Read a
Yeah,
book,
and
play a game,
by
whatever you
the way,
want to do.
if you are feeling that, if you are feeling that pushback, if you are feeling guilt and shame, I think it's really really important to state, if you're feeling that guilt and shame as you're trying to pull away, then don't ignore that. You're on to something. Something is happening here. And I want you to sit down and maybe journal or just talk to yourself in a quiet room or whatever it is. Ask yourself this question: what is compelling you toward work? Or more simply, what are you trying to prove? Because if it's the love of work itself, you won't feel guilt or shame walking away from it, knowing that you're coming back tomorrow or onto your next shift. If you're feeling guilt and shame doing things and not constantly thinking about work, then you're trying to prove something. It's either to yourself and or to other people. So ask yourself, what am I trying to prove? And if you can deconstruct that and start getting more better in touch with the things that really do drive you, the things like the love for the work that isn't compelled by this need to prove yourself, because maybe you were a horrible student and people said you would be nothing, and then now you're a paramedic and you're saving lives. Look at me now, but you're still trying to prove that shit to somebody. Like, you've got to figure that out and work that out,
Right.
and you will thank me for that.
100%. And I appreciate your time. Like I said, this was very enjoyable. If you think it's too heavy to say it anyway. It beats a eulogy. You don't have to apologize for surviving however you can. You're not the reason things are heavy. You're the reason they're still moving. Need support right now? Reach out to me. Reach out to somebody. Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone. Not in this job. Not in this fight. Want to share your story or connect? Visit critical-run.com or message the Facebook page, Dispatched and Dysfunctional. We're building this for you, for them, for all of us.